Hello, and welcome to Nursing News You Can Use at 5 with Tina Baxter. I'm here with your nursing business news. Thank you for tuning in. Today is September the 27th, 2023. Let's talk about our affirmations and inspirational quotes for today. Number one, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Again, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Ralph Waldo Emerson. If we did all the things we are capable of doing, we would literally astound ourselves. If we all did the things we are capable of doing, we would literally astound ourselves. And that is from Thomas Edison. And then lastly, dreams are illustrations from the book your soul is writing about you. Dreams are illustrations from the book your soul is writing about you, from Marsha Norman. So I want to go ahead and get into that, our news, because we got a lot to cover. But this is coming from an inspirational daily calendar by Lauren Drash. So gave credit where credit is due. But let's get into the news, because there's a lot going on in the world today that we need to talk about. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I'm going to, let's see if I can share my screen. Here we go, so you can see what I'm seeing. All right, so it says, as COVID infections rise, nursing homes are still waiting for vaccines. This is coming from the New York Times. It says, Debbie Wittick, a 70-year-old retired massage therapist who lived in a nursing home called Spurgeon Manor in rural Iowa. COVID is not pretty in a nursing home. She contracted the disease twice and is eager to get the newly approved vaccine because she has chronic leukemia, which weakens her immune system. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention approved the latest vaccine 2 weeks ago, and the new shots became available to the general public within the last week or so. But many nursing homes will not begin inoculations until well into October or even November, though infections among this vulnerable population are rising to nearly 1% or 9.7% per 1,000 residents of mid-September, from a low of 2.2 to 1,000 residents in mid-June. According to Chad Warts, the distribution of the new COVID vaccine is not going well. He's the chief executive of the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists. It says older adults in those settings are certainly the most vulnerable and should have been prioritized. With the end of the formal public health emergency in May, the federal government stopped purchasing and distributing COVID vaccines. That has added new complications for operators of nursing homes who have encountered resistance throughout the pandemic in persuading people, especially employees, to receive yet another round of shots. The coronavirus decimated nursing homes during the first 2 years of the pandemic, killing more than 200,000 residents and staff members. So again, we're seeing that this is a big issue. And this is something that we need to keep an eye on. And so please look at the New York Times article. There's a lot more to this article. And I've seen it in other places where now that the new vaccines are available, it's difficult to get. All right, let's move on to our next story. This is coming out of Iowa. Interesting enough, this is coming from the Des Moines Register. And this was a story that I found kind of interesting. I think we've talked about this. It's from the Iowa Capitol Dispatch. And it says, ex-nurse at Sioux City nursing home tied to deaths says she was ordered to falsify records. A nurse who resigned from an Iowa care facility that has been cited in multiple deaths testified at a hearing recently that she was instructed to falsify medical records and have unqualified aides administer medications to residents. This is the testimony of Teresa A. Hansen coming from a hearing on September 13th on her request for unemployment benefits. In late June, Hansen resigned from Countryside Healthcare Center in Sioux City, where she had worked for 6 months as a registered nurse. As a charge nurse at the facility, Hansen was responsible for overseeing certified nursing assistants and passing out medications to residents. In spring and early 2023, she testified management at Countryside cut the number of employees to the point where it's difficult to maintain the staffing levels needed to provide care to the 52 residents. She testified in June that the facility's management instructed her to train a certified nursing assistant or CNA on how to perform the duties of a licensed registered nurse. According to state records, she also testified that managers informed her that moving forward, the CNA would take over certain nursing duties such as passing out medication, and that Hansen would be required to sign off on the related documentation, making it appear that she had performed the work. So there is room in long-term care for CNAs to become what we call in Indiana qualified medication aides, and that they would be trained to be able to pass and give certain medications, not all, under the direction of a licensed nurse. Nowhere does it say that the nurse would be signing that she gave the medication. It's always a person who gives it medication that signs for it, and the nurse may have to co-sign. So that's how it usually works. But according to this article, it says that when she objected, management allegedly told her not to question the decision. The next day, she testified she resigned effective immediately. At the hearing on her claim for unemployment benefits, Hansen testified that providing medical treatments to residents falls out of a CNA's scope of practice, which is true, and that signing false documentation would be illegal, which is true, and would jeopardize her nursing license. That is also true. Countryside opted not to have a representative testify at the hearing, according to state records, which might have been in their best interest because that might have opened them up to perjury, right, if this indeed did happen. So the administrative law judge, Patrick B. Thomas, ruled that Hansen's allegations were credible and that she had resigned for good cause attributable to the nursing home. So she was awarded her benefits. So Countryside then closed in late July, 1 month after she left. So this is bigger. This is a bigger story, and I wanted to bring this story out because nurses, if they're putting you in a position that you could possibly lose your license, you need not to do this, right? Don't do it. You worked hard to get your license. Don't let somebody talk you into doing something that's illegal. It's your license to lose. And so a month after she quits, they go belly up. That's interesting. So it says, state records indicate the home's administrator in early June was Jackie Lori Perner, and that before the home closed, she was replaced by Scott Mao. The nursing home administration licenses of both Mal and Lori Perner are in good standing with the state with no public record of disciplinary action. So okay, that's wonderful. But it says in the 7 months leading up to Countryside's closure, the home was cited for a January incident that involved a female resident who was found unresponsive on the floor of her room. The woman was sent by ambulance to a hospital and died en route. Countryside was cited for failing to provide the woman with adequate supervision and for failing to report the incident to the state. 20 federal violations and 5 state violations by state inspectors visiting the facility in April in response to a backlog of 19 uninvestigated complaints. The state proposed $44,000 in fines, but held those in suspension to give federal regulators at the CMS an opportunity to impose penalties. One of the citations was for failing to inform the state about a resident who fell and died, while another was a failure to intervene when open, foul-smelling wounds on a resident's legs led to her hospitalization and 1 week later, her death. 4 federal violations and 1 state violation by inspectors who returned to Countryside in response to 3 complaints, all of which were substantiated. The state then proposed $30,000 in additional fines, but again held them in suspension. One of the citations was for failing to check vital signs and contact a physician after a resident's blood pressure and urinary output dropped and her abdomen became distended. The resident died shortly after being hospitalized. 8 federal violations and 1 state violation when investigators or inspectors again visited the facility. In June, the state proposed a $500 fine that was held in suspension. They also included failure to report to the state major injuries sustained by residents of the home and failure to report a resident being hospitalized with sepsis, a life threatening blood infection. Because you can see that there were problems here at this facility. And so, with all the fines, um, it looks like it totaled in June of 2022, they had fines of $28,191. So wow. So they asked for comment from the owners, the previous owners, Isaac Dole of the investment firm Birchwood Healthcare Partners. He was a former managing director of acquisitions at Avid REIT, which is apparently the owner of the Countryside at that time. They did not respond for comment, but this is just amazing. And so there's other issues that came from this nursing home that are in pending lawsuits. So yeah, this is why I brought this story up. Nurses, protect your license. No job is worth losing your license and possibly going to jail because they will not be loyal to you. Trust me. All right. So that brings up this question because then, and again, I'm not picking on long-term care, but these are in the news, and so I have to report them. This came from Yahoo News. This is from the Chicago Tribune. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, again, if you're going to have staff and own a facility, you got to train them properly in what to do. And this is another case of what I think is just really, really appalling measures. We talked about previously the case in Florida where no one knew CPR. Well, in this case, no one knew how to handle oxygen. All right, so let's get into it. It says, and I'm going to go ahead and share because I think you need to see this one. So I'm going to share my screen on this one so people will know. I'm not making this stuff up. Not at all. Not at all. Here's what it says. Jury awards family $5.5 million in death for a mom who went without supplemental oxygen at Palos Heights nursing home. Okay. So it says that she lost her supplemental oxygen when power went out in her room. So 80-year-old Betty Patterson died in Providence, Palos Heights in 2016 after her family said she had broken her hip the previous winter. Patterson suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and was on oxygen through a nasal cannula continuously, the lawsuit by her survivors said. Okay, so according to the daughter, they said, and I'm sorry, I'm missing part of the article, I think. But according to the daughter, her oxygen, her power was out, her oxygen was out, and she was there for 20 minutes with no oxygen. 20 minutes, no oxygen. The family, of course, is obviously upset. The nursing home, Rest Haven Ileana Christian Convalescent Home, doing business as Providence Life Services, was a non-for-profit, right? The defense attorneys didn't respond. The nursing home has since closed, and the award is subject to change after post-trial requests. But I wanted to say, I'm going to go ahead and stop the sharing there. But in the article, it talked about how she, for 20 minutes, that she didn't have any care and that the nurses didn't know what to do when the power went out. That's what stuck with me. I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean they didn't know what to do? That's what it said. The nurses didn't know what to do when the power went out. And I'm thinking to myself, now I remember when I was being trained as a CNA many years ago, we were shown and told that power goes out, there's a generator. You hook everybody that's on oxygen into the red socket so that if the power goes out, the generator still works. So that's number one. Number two, if the woman was without oxygen and they knew this was going on, there should have been portable oxygen or concentrated liquid oxygen in the facility. So that's where I'm like thinking, okay, so where was the critical thinking here? And so I'm just, I'm really concerned. I said, because you need to train your staff on what they need to do and what they need to know. And I think that in this time of turnover and everything that's happening in the industry and certainly in other places, what I'm seeing is that there's a real lack of in-depth onboarding when you get an employee, unfortunately. And then you have incidents like this. And then if no one is taught the proper thing and you get all this turnover, and the one person who may have known what to do or know where things were are gone, you perpetuate that cycle of everybody just kind of doing what they can. And so I just can't imagine myself as a nurse knowing that someone is on oxygen and they can't get it and there's no power to their room, leaving them in the room saying, well, I don't know what to do. I don't understand that. And so I'm like, there should have been supplemental oxygen. I don't know all the facts of the case. I do want to say that I don't know all the facts of the case. I'm not giving a legal opinion at all of this, but it just brings me back to, we need to make sure that we're doing the right training. And when you're having all this turnover time and time again, it's really hard to get that. It's really hard to make sure all those things are in place and that you've caught those things when you're trying to run here and do that. And it's concerning because we're seeing these changes in the nursing home industry where there's a lot of facilities that are closing down. The new staffing mandates are causing them to be weary of staying open. There's a lot that goes into this. And so we need to, as one, nurses, take care of ourselves and protect our license. But two, we need to make sure we are protecting our patients as well. And so this really hits home. Because then you have stories like this, and I wasn't too sure about it, and I'm going to just let you think of it on yourself. You think about this yourself, because this one kind of threw me for a loop. And it says, legislative committee considers locating child care centers in nursing homes. All right, this is from McKnight's Long-Term Care News, or McKnight Senior Living. And I'm okay. I'm thinking, okay, this sounds like an interesting proposal, but let's get into it. It says, child care centers could be located in nursing homes under a proposal discussed Monday by the South Dakota Study Committee on Sustainable Models for Long-Term Care. The idea, if implemented, would allow elementary school-age children to learn how to care for nursing home residents, proponents say. So let me stop here, because I had to take it back. So you're saying you're going to put a daycare, a child care center in a nursing home so you can train elementary school children how to take care of the residents in the nursing home? Because that's what it sounds like to me. And I'm not exactly sure where this is going. So I need to do some more study on what they're actually saying, but this is how it's sounding. And it says State Senator Aaron Tobin said the situation could be a win-win and might help reduce the overhead for both child care centers and nursing homes. So then that becomes my next question. So are you proposing that the nursing home staff / residents care for these children and make sure they got what they need? On the flip side, are you asking the children to care for these older adults? What's happening here? So I want to make sure I understand what they're saying. So the idea was one of several on a list compiled by the committee for consideration in the 2024 legislative session. The committee, chaired by State Senator Gene Hunoff and State Representative Taylor Rayfeld, met with multiple health organizations in the state to gather suggestions. They say, Mark Dean, Executive Director of the South Dakota Healthcare Association, says the focus has primarily been on nursing homes, and there have been a number of innovative, positive ideas brought forward so far. However, the primary area that needs to continue to be addressed is fully funding South Dakota's updated skilled nursing facility methodology. This is the foundation of continuing to sustain long-term care providers in South Dakota. Okay. So, among the topics discussed, long term care experts expressed concerns over the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services proposed minimum staffing rule for nursing homes, which would mandate at least 3 hours per patient day of direct care, 0.55 hours of that with an RN, and 2.45 hours by a CNA. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, so are you planning on replacing CNAs with these unlicensed, unskilled elementary children? Because that's kind of what it sounds like on the surface. Um, so I'm not exactly sure, but if any of you that are in South Dakota and you know what's going on with this bill, because I'm gonna have to do more research on this, let me know. Let me know in the comments, because I just thought this just didn't sound right, and let's talk about that one. Let's talk about it, okay? All right, let's go to this next story. Okay, let me get this. There's a lot of news to cover today. So this is coming from CBS Colorado. And this says state of Colorado penalizes Broomfield nursing home for cybersecurity breach. And I'm bringing this up because I just talked to someone, I think it was yesterday, and there was a nursing home, and one of the students, yes, it was yesterday, one of the nursing students was in a facility, not a nursing home, but in the hospital. And she was taking a selfie in the hospital while she was in nursing school, taking a selfie. She was in front of the board that had all the patients' names readily available that you can read. She was right in front of the computer screen with all the names and everything. And of course, she posted on social media. So obviously, that person was disinvited as a student to participate in clinicals at that facility. And I want to say, you know, this is why I bring those things up, because you have to think about your actions and your consequences here. So when I'm talking about this cybersecurity breach, I want you to be aware that these things can happen. So Broomfield Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation Center and Assisted Living in Broomfield will pay a fine and be required to upgrade its information security systems following a 2021 data breach that exposed the personal data of hundreds of current and former patients and employees. In March of that year, the facility discovered 2 employee email accounts had been compromised. The company had established 2-factor authentication for access to its email system, but the 2 accounts were not protected. Tens of thousands of emails in those 2 accounts contained personal, financial, and medical data, some of it dating back to 2017. That goes to show you, maybe we should dump our email chain a lot more than we are, right? Do we have stuff that we've saved from many years in our email? Good question. Do a cyber check. It says the Colorado Attorney General's office announced a settlement on Friday, stating every cybersecurity threat is potentially devastating, but it's particularly troubling when older Coloradans and those who care for them are the victims of cybercrime due to a failure on the part of a nursing facility to properly handle the personal data of patients and employees. While the damage has already been done in this case, let this settlement be a warning that I will not hesitate to act against any company that fails to comply with the Colorado data protection laws. The office also criticized the business's response, accusing it of waiting months before notifying those affected. Businesses are legally required to do so within 30 days. So I want you to know that's important. It also said that they broke state law by not having a paper and electronic data disposal policy in place. So the nursing home agreed to pay between $35,000 and $60,000 to develop the disposable policy and incident response plan, to make other updates to its information security systems, to review annually the safeguards put in place, and submit compliance reports, and to cooperate with investigations by state monitors. So this is an important thing. So, you know, be careful out there. All right, let's move on to other news. This is from the Oregon Nurses Association. This is coming out from kgw.com. It says OHSU nurses reach tentative agreement on new contract to avoid a strike, which I think is wonderful. Anytime we can work it out, I think that's great. And so it says this is a huge accomplishment, and we appreciate the time and efforts of everyone involved, including the nearly 3,200 nurses who are at the heart of this contract, the two sides said in a shared statement. Member discussion about the tentative agreement will begin on Friday, and a vote will ratify it. In a news release, ONA said the new deal includes, quote, historic wage increases, safe staffing standards, paid training, workplace safety improvements, and changes to lockdown procedures, among other provisions. Corin Joseph, a registered nurse at OHSU and bargaining team member for ONA, said they negotiated this new contract not only for themselves, but to set a standard for hospitals everywhere. Joseph says across the nation and the world, nursing has become not only a risk to our mental health, but our physical safety. We set out with the intention to build a better contract, one that would change standards. We did this not only for our nurses, but to help raise the bar for hospitals everywhere. So here are the key provisions in the tentative agreement. Minimum safe staffing standards guaranteed on June 1 of 2024, including a specific plan for the emergency department levels and a 1-to-3 acute care mixed IMHC ratios written into the contract, and a guarantee to follow professional standards that set ratios and levels for all other areas. Wage increases of 15%, 6%, and 6% each year, as well as a new 30-step wage scale. The average base wage will increase 37% and will average to $20.67 hour increase over 3 years. Major expansion of the Code Green team that includes social workers trained in de-escalation for the Markham Hill campus and newly provided to the Waterfront campus. Paid training for trauma-informed care and in-person de-escalation training, including advanced physical skills, crisis intervention, and assault prevention. 24/7 coverage of metal detector screenings in Department of Public Safety, presence, and emergency departments. Major improvements to workplace safety, including 50% of positions for nurses and AFSCME members on a task force to allocate $10 million in funds. A commitment to immediately institute urgent changes to lockdown procedures, securing entrances, and other workplace violence reduction. The right to bargain the impacts of a merger with legacy health system, and full retro pay. I want to say congratulations to them for getting what they needed. And that's wonderful what we can do when we pull together. So I think that's great. Congratulations to those nurses. Because that brings us to this story. This is from Stat. And I happen to come on this, and this is something I try to keep abreast of. And so it says suicide rates for nurses and healthcare support workers at higher risk. So it says jobs in the healthcare are known to be challenging for workers' mental health, but the mental health toll can be especially burdensome for registered nurses, health technicians, and healthcare support workers who are at a higher risk of suicide compared to the general population, according to the study published Tuesday in the Journal of American Medical Association that looked at a nationally representative cohort of about 1.84 million employed people, both within the healthcare field and outside, from 2008 to 2019. This is the first study to really look across all of healthcare workers, said Mark Olfson, a professor of psychiatry at Columbia University and the paper's lead author. The study compared the risk of registered nurses, health technicians, healthcare support workers such as nursing and home health aides, and social and behavioral health workers, as well as physicians, with people not working in healthcare. He says, what we do know from this study that if you control for the level of education and you control for income, you still see that healthcare support workers are almost twice as likely to die of suicide. While there's further research is required to understand why certain professions within healthcare work carry a higher suicide risk, some clues may be found in the nature of these jobs. They are often repetitive and less remunerative than physician roles. In other words, you do the same thing every day, you get paid less money, with fewer opportunities for career progression. Being in a lower hierarchical position in a high stress healthcare environment could carry additional stress, he said. Compared to the suicide rate of 12.6 per 100,000 people for those who are not healthcare workers, healthcare support workers had a risk of 21 per 100,000, nurses 16 per 100,000, and health technicians 15.6 per 100,000. Physicians, on the other hand, were not found to be at a higher risk of suicide compared to non health workers. Although often cautions that this should not be taken as a reason to underestimate the stress doctors are subjected to, and we've certainly known that physicians have had high suicide rates as well. The study has also found that men had an overall higher risk of suicide, but remain essentially unvaried between healthcare workers and the rest of the population. Female healthcare workers, however, had a significantly higher risk of suicide, about 50% higher than the baseline reference. So this is, again, something that we need to contact. And again, if you're having any suicidal thoughts, always you can contact the 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline. You can call or text them, or chat with 988lifeline.org. All right. Let's get to our next story. Okay, so we've got a couple of things, and I do want to point this out because this is the second incident that I've had of a individual posing to be a nurse, and this is coming out more and more frequently. And this is from woodtv.com. This is from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So if you know this person or hear this person, be aware she has been spreading this around from different places. So a woman from Allegan County has been indicted on several federal charges after allegedly posing as a registered nurse to defraud employers. You know what? I want to go ahead. Sorry, not to. Again, she is innocent until proven guilty, but I do want to share this so you know I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but this is her. If you see it, okay. So Leticia Galarzo, 48, has been indicted by a federal grand jury for several charges, including wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, making false statements in medical records, and production of a false identification document. A Wednesday release from the U.S. Attorney's Office said she faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison for wire fraud and 2 years mandatory imprisonment for aggravated identity theft if convicted. She was previously indicted for similar charges in Texas. The indictment alleges Galarzo used a Michigan license number and the name of a person's license as a nurse so she could get a job as a registered nurse at a nursing home and at a Grand Rapids hospice facility. They said that the hospice facility discovered Galarzo's fingerprints matched others that were on record because of her previous state and federal convictions. So this isn't just indictments. This is convictions for practicing nursing without a license in Texas in 2015 and 2016. So she has done this before. So I wanted to let you know, again, be careful out there with your information. Identity theft is running rampant, and people are pretending to be other people and taking their licenses and operating and doing illegal things. And so you need good identity theft protection. I'm just going to say that. You want to know how to get it? Hit me up. All right. So let's move on. Okay. Okay. Did you hear about this one? I just thought this was interesting. This is from nurse.org, by the way. And I just found this story interesting. It says a nurse made $20,000 in 1 week working at Chicago migrant shelter, and invoice shows. So um, there's a picture here, and I'll go ahead and show it just so you know again. I'm going to share it. Here's the picture of the invoice. Not making this up. So the city of Chicago has paid over $56 million to favorite healthcare staffing to provide healthcare services for more than 13,000 migrants who arrived in Chicago over the past year, according to records obtained by NBC5 investigations. According to an invoice obtained by the news station, one nurse was paid $20,000 for 1 week of work at the migrant shelter. The city denied any request for additional records to show how the money was allocated. Several aldermen are calling for more transparency. But according to this, the invoices, favorite healthcare staffing charges $135 per hour for temporary nurses working at migrant shelters. The total costs for migrant care and related services are escalating quickly, according to reports. At this rate, taxpayers in Chicago could end up paying well over $100 million per year for migrant health care and other costs. So my question is, how much of that did the nurse actually get, and how much was actually given to the staffing agency? But that's what they're saying it costs. So we'll get into more of that, and we'll keep an eye on this. But I just found that quite interesting. So, all right, let's get to this story. So this is I found this a good, an interesting story here. It's about an app that's out there to help you schedule as a nurse, and it says "Need a nurse?" There's an app for that. I think this is wonderful, and this is coming out of Cleveland, Ohio. All right. So it says when there aren't enough nurses to go around, one of the challenges is making nurses available where they're needed most. While no single piece of technology can solve the nursing shortage, one company has taken a cue from Uber and Amazon and developed an app it claims has the potential to lessen the pinch. Healthcare organizations lose money when they overstaff, but nurses burnt out and patients are put at risk when they are asked to care for too many patients at once. The problem, some say, is that traditional staffing just can't keep up with the constantly changing demands of patient censuses, which is true. It's really hard to do that. Sorry, I need a sip of water. To help address this mismatch, Tony Braswell launched Gale, a staffing app that offers nurses local jobs on a shift by shift basis. Gale's name is a homage to Florence Nightingale in the 19th century British nurse who is considered the matriarch of the nursing profession. With Gale, nurses sign up and enter the job pool. Participating healthcare organizations post available shifts in real time, and qualified nurses can accept or decline the jobs when and where they want. So Braswell said, we were calling nurses one at a time, and we realized that was just not efficient. And as a person who's in management, it's really difficult. You're calling, you leave a voicemail, it might not get picked up, they don't respond. And back in the day, I was paging nurses, didn't get a response. So this is what's really nice. The nurses can opt into a shift if they want to. So Braswell, who ran a healthcare staffing agency out of Tampa, Florida for 25 years before he launched the app in 2016. He says nurses can't work remotely, unfortunately, but they want flexibility. Our technology allows nurses to do their work when they want to, where they want to, and we pay them usually within 8 minutes of getting off work 7 days a week. So you get paid instantly for a shift. Can you imagine that? Getting paid, you finish work, you clock out, you get paid within 8 minutes. You have your paycheck for that day's work. So, unlike travel nursing, in which nurses take short term assignments at locations around the country. Braswell says that Gale allows hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes to staff daily shifts with local nurses, saving them the cost of flights and accommodations. This helps healthcare organizations boost their nursing pool quickly as needed and in a more cost effective way, and it opens up a much larger market of nurses. Single parents, for example, have difficulty taking traveling nursing jobs, but may well be interested in picking up a few extra shifts as their schedule allows, giving local nurses opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. And based on the numbers, he says it's working. So back in the old days, Braswell says his staffing company worked with around 100 nurses. Today, they have over 60,000 active nurses and 40 of the 50 U.S. states enrolled in their system, roughly 5,000 in Ohio alone. Jameer Taylor, an LPN from Garfield Heights, is one of them. He's been using the app for about a year now to pick up 7 or 8 extra shifts a month on top of his full-time nursing job. He says the way they have it is set up pretty nice, explaining that he is conveniently able to see all the available shifts, the hourly pay rate each offers, and select the ones he wants. And if he has any questions about the facility or the job before he accepts, there's a phone number he can call to speak with someone in person. That's awesome. After he finishes a shift, he clicks a few buttons and gets paid the same day. One of the benefits, says Taylor, of working with Gail is that he's not considered self-employed by the IRS. Unlike many other gig economy workers that are hired on a 1099 or a contract basis, they're hired as a W-2 employee. So by working as a W-2 employee, nurses are entitled to certain protections, including overtime pay, workman's comp, liability insurance that they would not otherwise have under 1099. It says, on the organizational side, Braswell says that the clinics and nursing homes and small healthcare centers are the primary providers of jobs right now. Hospitals, he says, have been slower to adopt the technology, but he's confident they're coming around. He says, we've been around for going on 8 years, and the hospitals are only now just starting to go, whoa, what are you all doing? Braswell said he believes that the nursing profession can blend the flexibility of today's gig economy with protections of traditional employment in ways that gives both nurses and healthcare organizations they work for the best of both worlds and patients, the caregivers they so desperately need. So I think that's great. All right. So let's look at this next story before we get to our last story, our last article. So this is coming from NPR and National Public Radio, Indiana Public Radio. And I intend to find this book and buy it. But this is about a book that was written, and it says, A History of Nurses They Once Had the Respect They're Now Trying to Win. I found this very interesting. It says, we've lost the idea of nurses as experts. That's what caught my attention. You know, those of you who are on the Nurse Shark Academy know that's what we are, experts in nursing, experts in business. We all are sharks, right? But this is interesting. This is author Sarah DeGreggio. We've lost the idea of nurses as authority figures. It's a topic she takes on in her new book, Taking Care, The Story of Nursing and Its Power to Change the World. She says, it goes on to say, as nurses today fight for better pay and more respect for their work, DeGreggio points out that centuries ago, they were regarded as an integral part of the healthcare system in many civilizations, revered for their knowledge and skills in the healing the sick, dating back to ancient times in India and the Islamic world. So here's some of the takeaways from her book. Both doctors and nurses have had to have knowledge about medications, but it was the nurses who provided direct patient care, according to Chakra Samhita, a key Indian medical text from 2,000 years ago. They had to have hands-on skill with patients as well as good character, kindness, and interpersonal skills. In the 600s, a woman named Rafuda al-Aslamia was a nurse in the early days of Islam when the Prophet Muhammad was at war in what is now Saudi Arabia. Rafuda and her team traveled with Muhammad's army and cared for wounded soldiers. She was later in charge of providing primary care and health education in Mecca. Public health care subsequently became very important in this very early Islamic world, according to DeGreggio in her book, and nurses had an important role in it. While the nursing profession today is predominantly female, that was not the case back then in the teaching hospitals of the region. These hospitals had professional nurses, both men and women. She goes on to say that European men took away the legitimacy of nurses. The opening of new medical schools in Europe during the Middle Ages ushered in an era that slowly pushed women out of medicine and healthcare. The new medical schools, which only allowed men, started turning out a new professional class of physicians, who were all men with social status, de Gregorio observes. Only those with a license from one of these medical schools could practice medicine. She cites from court cases where popular women nurses were tried and punished. So, are we not seeing the same thing happening now as in the case of the California nurse practitioner that dared call herself a doctor in her advertising, even though she clearly said she had a doctorate of nursing practice, clearly identified as a nurse practitioner, but yet we're saying we're confusing the patients and taking over the precious territory of physicians. But I digress. I digress. So, anyway, so it's Florence Nightingale both helped and harmed the field of nursing. And this is the part of nursing that we don't like to talk about, but we've talked about it before in the show. It says, while Florence Nightingale is often credited as a force in reviving the importance of nurses, her vision of the profession had flaws that have persisted to this day, argues de Greggio. A wealthy Londoner who trained at a nursing school in Germany and then ran a small women's hospital in London, Nightingale was well known to the British authorities. They turned to her for help during the Crimean War in the 1850s, when British soldiers were dying at very high rates, mainly due to infections in the hospital. But while nurses were brought back into the healthcare system under her leadership, she had a negative impact too, says de Greggio. Nightingale viewed nursing as an all-female profession that's, quote, subordinate to physicians, which sets up this idea that nurses are assistants to physicians. She took her orders from the physicians and never challenged their authority. If a physician had not ordered water for a dying man, Nightingale would not give the man water, writes de Greggio, who draws her findings from nursing historians who have studied Nightingale as well as newspaper reports. Nightingale, in turn, didn't want her authority challenged and imposed a strict hierarchical structure for her staff. De Greggio cites historian Carol Homstetter, who uncovered that Nightingale fired nurses for feeding patients without explicit orders. So, in other words, if there is no order for you to have a diet, you didn't eat. One of the nurses complained to Nightingale's superior in London, quoted saying, "We do not look for any comforts, but we do feel we ought to be trusted. We are not allowed to go into the wards without one of the lady supervisor nurses. We must not speak one word of comfort to a poor dying man or read to him," the nurse wrote. "We are prevented from doing what our hearts prompt us to do. We feel we are not so useful as we are expected to be." Is that not an echo of how nurses are feeling today? But let's go on. The article talks about racism in nursing, and we certainly talked about Mary C. Cole before, so I want to talk about it again because this is what the article does. It says, when Florence Nightingale announced that she was recruiting nurses, an accomplished nurse from Jamaica named Mary C. Cole traveled to London to look for work. C. Cole, quote, had previously been hired by the British government in Jamaica to organize nursing for an epidemic of yellow fever. Yet she was repeatedly rejected from the office of Sidney Herbert, the Secretary of War, and his wife, who was recruiting nurses for Nightingale. C. Cole wrote in her autobiography, quote, "Did these ladies shrink from accepting my aid because my blood flowed beneath a somewhat duskier skin than theirs?" She was so heartbroken that she left with tears in her eyes. Still, C. Cole went to the front lines at her own expense to care for soldiers and returned home after the war. A century later, racial disparities persist in nursing. Nursing is disproportionately white in the United States, de Greggio says. It's like 81% white. And racial discrimination remains a problem. A 2021 study found that 92% of Black nurses, 73% of Asian nurses, and 69% of Hispanic nurses have faced racism from colleagues and patients. And it's a major factor for non white nurses wanting to leave their jobs. So again, sounds like a fascinating book, and I am excited to read it. So I'm going to find the book and read it, and that will probably be an upcoming segment. I'll pull some more things out of there for that. But if you want to know about the book, I will leave a link to the article for you as well, because I definitely want to get the book myself. All right, let's move to A Nurse Making a Difference. This is our last story for today because we're almost out of time. And here it goes. This is a nurse making a difference posthumously, because it says family remembers Marshall nurse by handing out nursing school scholarships. 19 nursing students from across Texas were honored with scholarships this week through the Polly Cargill Nursing Scholarship Fund, with special reception event hosted by East Texas Baptist University on Thursday. Students from East Texas Baptist University School of Nursing, as well as Latorno University and the University of Texas, were honored with scholarships during the event. The scholarships are a memorial to Polly Cargill, a nurse at Good Shepherd Medical Center. After she died, her sons Jerry and Jack decided to honor their mother's legacy, as well as the care shown to their family during such a difficult time, by helping students in East Texas become equipped and compassionate nurses. The Cargill brothers were present during the reception this week, greeting students and recognizing the important work that the field of nursing holds in society. Jerry Cargill stated this is the 20th anniversary of their scholarship, and the family has successfully given out 106 scholarships during that time. And so I do want to share that because I want you to see the picture of these future nurses and their very bright faces. So I will show this picture and share this screen for you. And I thought that was great. So you can see these are the nursing student scholarship recipients, and these are the Cargills. And I think this is wonderful that all these different nurses, male, female, different backgrounds, will be entering the profession. So I'm excited about that. So congratulations to Polly Cargill and her sons in her honor, her being the nurse that made a difference. That even now, she's still continuing to make a difference by her memory. So I want to thank you for that. All right, let's stop the sharing. Okay, so that brings it into all of our stories and articles and all the news for today. Don't forget to tune into our show every week here at the on our Nurse Shark Academy page and our Baxter Professional Services page, and also on our YouTube channel. You can certainly catch us there every Wednesday at 5. I do want to get some quick announcements in because this is coming up to our last week. It's just a week before our big event, which will be on LinkedIn. And also we're going to live stream the Facebook here. It's our Fall Back in Love with Nursing event. I'm very excited. We've already got several people signed up on LinkedIn. If you want to get registered on Facebook, now's a good time to get registered there, or go to our LinkedIn page and register for the event on LinkedIn. We're live streaming there as well. But I'm very excited about that because I want to talk about finding the joy back in the nursing profession and how to take control over your own career. And of course, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. So that's coming up on October the 4th. We've got a lot of great things that are happening. So be on the lookout for our announcements and content that's coming up in the month of October. There's a lot of great things that we are involved in. So I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want you to have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye for now.